Good afternoon, everyone. This is Art Wimberly. I'm a volunteer at the Addiction Prevention Coalition, headquartered here in Birmingham, Alabama. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. We're going to be having a nice chat with Brandon Lackey, who is the Chief Program Officer at the Foundry. And I'm going to introduce him in more detail in just a minute, and then we're going to get into what I think is going to be a great conversation. I am a person grateful to be in long-term recovery. I'm also a recovery coach, do work with Enneagram and 12 steps, and love to volunteer with Addiction Prevention Coalition. And we know some of you are just now joining in, and people will be joining over the next few minutes. A reminder, because the webinar is live, we will be trying to answer your questions. So if you want to put something in the Q&A, we will do our very best to get to it today with Brandon before we close out. So we'll be monitoring those as we go along, and we love to have interaction with these discussions. And as a reminder, if you've got someone who's missing the live webinar, this will be in our library, and you'll be able to get back to it through the APC website. If you have to miss part of it today, you can always come back to it. So if someone misses it, remind them that they can come back. And we've got a fairly large library now of things like this and similar to it, where we have spoken with and had conversations with many different people in prevention and recovery around Birmingham, Alabama, even the nation. And so there's a treasure trove of good information and education out there for you. So I see folks joining in, and I know they'll continue to do that. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Brandon, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Art. It's an honor to partner with you in this series. And I've been a huge admirer of APC from its very beginnings. You guys do great work.
Well, thank you for saying that, and thanks for what you guys do. My guess would be that for those that are familiar with your name, it's probably because of your work with the Foundry, now as Chief Program Officer, but you've been there before that doing it, but you've also got decades really going back, I believe, working in prevention and recovery in not just at the Foundry, but in other places. Before we get into some details about that and then go forward with some of our discussion, would you share just a little bit about your personal life, about your family?
We'll be glad to. Again, my name's Brandon Lackey. I'm the Chief Program Officer for the Foundry Ministries, and I've been with the Foundry for about 7 years, but I have right at 20 years of recovery ministry experience. I am the father of 2 boys. I have James, who is 14, and John Brooks, who's 12. And I am the husband to Deidre, a amazingly talented photographer. She's been published nationally, and just such a creative and lively helpmate, coming up on 17 years of marriage. So super excited about that this September. But you're right. My beard was not as white as it is now when I got into this field, this ministry, this calling. I grew up kind of my formative teenage years in Bessemer, Alabama, in Hueytown, Alabama, which is where the Foundry Ministries is located, or the office is located. We have multiple campuses around the state, as well as some social enterprises that support our ministries, but more about that later. And so, yeah, this is a little bit of a surprise. I grew up in a godly household, surrounded by some amazing men and women in my church. And I believe that the men and women that God placed in my life really made the difference for me. I very easily could have the testimony of being a person in long-term recovery or to have struggled with addictions. Just a few life decisions and the influence of those godly men and women, I believe, made a huge difference. Addiction run in my family for generations. immediate family have struggled. And I was actually volunteering with the first ministry where I served when I received the phone call that my biological father had passed away of an Oxycontin addiction. And so it kind of really set my feet on a path that I did not anticipate. Growing up in Bessemer with some of the disadvantages, economic disadvantages, and some of the other obstacles that life throws at you when you may not share, a home with both parents, and so I did everything I could to do it the right way to kind of get out of Bessemer, to change my trajectory, my family tree's trajectory. And I've just, in my entire life, I gave my life to the Lord at a young age. And although I wasn't perfect, God was faithful, and He walked closely with me my entire life. And I've just always felt God's hand on me in a calling to ministry. And so you can use a lot of terms, recovery community, treatment and recovery, prevention. But really, for me personally, it's not a career. It's more of a calling. And I am an ordained minister appointed to the Foundry, and consider what I do to be the same as any other missionary around the world.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing all that. Anybody that knows you knows it's a calling, that it wasn't about looking for a job or a vocation, that it was a deep calling. And that's been proven out year after year after year. Because before Foundry, even you had a decade or so in Teen Challenge, is that right?
I did. I worked with one of the world's largest, oldest, and most successful residential recovery programs of its kind, founded in the 50s by the Reverend David Wilkerson. Teen Challenge was really a pioneer in a kind of an infancy type of ministry. And of course, drug use and abuse has not gotten better through the decades. It has continued to be major or having major impact on our society, our state, our families, and personally. There's very few families that you can talk with who don't have a story of abuse, addiction, treatment, and recovery. Generally, you don't have to go too far out for this to be a very pertinent and personal part of people's lives. And so there's a lot of opportunity. I spent about 14 years with Teen Challenge, started as a volunteer. I love volunteers to this day, and was willing to do whatever they needed me to do. And while I was there, I just fell in love with, first of all, the program participants. They called them students, men and women who to this day are some of the most talented, resourceful, amazing people I've ever met. And, the enemy's crafty that way. He loves to pick on God's people. And, if he can sabotage God's plan for someone's life, then he will do his best. And so it was a very large opportunity for me, someone who has a passion for advocacy and connecting people with solutions. And ultimately, I knew that because of my experience with Christ, that life is much, much better with Christ in my life than without him. I imagine it's a very lonely proposition to walk this life without the security and the comfort and the peace and love that relationship with Christ bears out. And so to be able to share that good news with men and women and families across the state who are really just looking for hope. I would say that's been the common denominator over the last 20 years, is that when the phone rings or the email comes in, the person on the other end is looking for that common denominator of hope. And doing what we do at the Foundry or at Teen Challenge at the time, it was it's been a very rewarding, personally and professionally, calling and career for myself and the teams that I've had the pleasure of serving with. So yes, 20 years of recovery ministry. And I will just say that God has a sense of humor. I told you that I did everything I could to get out of Bessemer. I've had, of all the choices I made, of all the opportunities that have been presented, the Lord brought me back to Bessemer of all places. And my office is actually in a building. It was our very first thrift store. And I used to shop in that thrift store as a teenager. The men who lived at the shelter at the time, they would panhandle me for cigarettes and pocket change. Little do they know I had neither. And so I walk into that building on a regular basis, thankful for what God's done in my life personally, but amazed at what he's done in the lives of the men and women and families that I've had the privilege to serve through the years. And lastly, it was also the fact that I fell in love with the staff 20 years ago. I saw a group of men and women who, through sacrificial service, were making a permanent and eternal difference in people's lives. And for the most part, I can say and testify that the majority of the men and women that I've worked with could quit today and go and better themselves and their family's economic situation, working in the for-profit world or the treatment world or just doing something different. But they've made the choice to serve others and to make a difference. And I'm very proud to serve with a team like that at the Foundry.
Yeah. I've noticed that over the years, what you're mentioning about the people that serve and work there. For them, it seems like a calling as well. And I want to affirm, I'm living proof of addiction touching every realm of society and families. Besides being a person grateful to be in long-term recovery, I am a parent of strugglers. We've had 3 of our 5 children struggle at different levels over the years. And I can also attest, you mentioned a few minutes ago about more than the one location of the Foundry. Our family benefited by the care and the ministry of the Foundry Farm in Coleman. One of my adult sons benefited from a long time there a few years ago. I think we could say safely it may have saved his life and set him on a different track. And we'll talk more about the different locations and the functions and the other connections you've got. And we're not going to get out of the discussion also without talking about your involvement with the Alabama Association of Christian Recovery Ministries too, because that has become a significant player in this state in prevention and recovery. Now, but I am aware that the Foundry is celebrating a pretty big anniversary. Can you tell us about that?
I can. You only get to celebrate your 50th anniversary once, and this year is the 50th at the Foundry. We started, or the ministry started as the Bessemer Rescue Mission in downtown Bessemer, Alabama. And if you kind of get the picture in your mind, you think back to some of the movies of the Jesus Saves neon sign on the side of the building, and the soup kitchen with a line and a few men. And what it was a humble beginning with huge ambition and heart, and it served the immediate needs of Bessemer or West Jefferson County's homeless population in significant ways for 25 years. Yeah. About 25 years ago, Pastor Bill Hines felt a calling to come to Bessemer, and he had a passion for changing the dynamic and entire conversation around permanent life change. He wasn't satisfied with just meeting the physical needs of the individual. And so what he did is he brought a program, a recovery program to Bessemer, one of the pioneers in that area to begin adding the necessary and needed wraparound services around the problem of homelessness. And so for about 20 years, Pastor Bill, with the help of an amazing team and so many generous individuals from Jefferson County, Central Alabama, and beyond, developed a continuum of care and a system of care that really it took on a life of its own. And thousands, if not tens of thousands of families across our state have had the opportunity, just like yours, to entrust us with their loved one or their friend, and hopefully that individual left our care better than they came into the door. So about 5 years ago, Micah Andrews and Pastor Bill, they transitioned. Pastor Bill is pastor emeritus, still involved. He did not retire. If he's watching, I have to say he's not retired. He is still going, ministering. It just took him about 20 years to get to the place where he could actually do what he wanted to do when he started the Foundry, which was pour into individuals. And so Micah Andrews is our CEO, and I serve at his pleasure. I was Micah's friend well before we became colleagues. And so I understood his heart and his passion, his vision. And what we have done in recent years is we've gone from, again, that homeless shelter to multiple ministries under an umbrella called the Foundry Ministries. But in recent years, we've really kind of narrowed down our focus to what we feel like we do the best. And so residential recovery services is kind of the peg that we hang our hat on. And then we try to partner with the other agencies and ministries in Alabama who are the best at what they do, so that we can provide the absolute best care and implement the best practices from many fields into the service and care that we provide at the Foundry. So in a nutshell, 50 years, I can't begin to imagine the impact that has had. But what I'm most excited about is the next 50 years. What does it look like to continue pushing back against drug abuse and addiction in our communities, in our state, in our nation? And at this time, we actually run multiple campuses. We mentioned that earlier. Our main campus is in Bessemer, our men's residential recovery program, and our women's residential recovery program are in Bessemer. We have a men's residential recovery program in Coleman County, and we also manage a ministry called Changed Lives Christian Center, which is a homeless transitional housing ministry, also kind of a melting pot for Birmingham's recovery community, treatment recovery, folks coming from dozens of agencies who kind of need that next step, that next level of care to reestablish themselves in a healthy community, in a healthy environment, and really begin contributing at a level that encourages success. And that's payment enough to see men and women finish what they start, and then everything they've lost be returned to them because they've been part of the philosophy of being invested in their own life recovery. I believe that's one of the things that makes the Foundry who we are, and that contributes to the levels of success that our program participants can attain. There are a lot of ministries and organizations and nonprofits who excel at charity and giving things away. But the Foundry, when Pastor Bill arrived 25 years ago, really shifted the focus to a partnership with our clients, kind of the hand up versus the hand out mentality, and which allowed us to provide the services that we provide for a extremely low or even a no cost basis, and do so on a long-term ability, so that the success rates and the level of success can become a cumulative process. We are a long-term residential program, like I said. We're 9 months residential, and then we have an optional 3-month non-residential component. Many of our clients transition to our transitional housing services so that they can continue working on their life plan, and again, remaining invested in their life recovery, making choices for themselves, and ultimately, seeing the things they've lost returned to them.
So over the years, would it be accurate to say that the Foundry has kind of evolved from originally more rescue, and then adding the recovery layers, and then even the reentry layers. So there's been this kind of metamorphosis over those 50 years where you've been able to add all those components. Does that make sense?
We diversified, and really, so many of our society's problems have issues in common. And again, we felt that recovery was where we wanted to focus. The Foundry managed and ran a very successful prison reentry ministry for about 15 years. But we felt that our true calling and to manage our resources the best way was to focus on recovery. But yes, it's been a tremendous growth from just a handful of individuals on cots in a hallway to people are often surprised to know that last night we had about 170 individuals sleep underneath the Foundry roof, and so we serve it with quantity in many cases, but our focus is on quality. We're kind of a both and organization. We think you can do both. We believe you can be spiritual and professional at the same time. You can respond in a timely fashion and continue to provide hope in your response. And so those are just examples of kind of the philosophy that Pastor Bill started and Micah continues. Very client-centric philosophy where the playing field is leveled and our clients, our program participants are actively engaged and participate in their own life recovery every day. And so for those in the helping professions, I think you would understand and recognize that those are healthy boundaries, and people tend to do well when they operate within healthy boundaries and understand what those are.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit then about, because the Foundry might not be for everybody, but you do have a niche, I would think, because like many states, Alabama, and maybe Alabama more than others, we have a lack of resources when it comes to dealing with both prevention and sound recovery, especially long-term sound recovery that is holistic as the Foundry is. And so you guys kind of serve a little bit of a niche though. So can you kind of describe what that might look like? In other words, I'm assuming most of the folks that come to you guys are not folks that are like coming from a really well-to-do situation or have the best insurance or have a lot of resources all the time. So can you describe that?
I can. Now, there is no typical program participant at the Foundry. I mean, we serve individuals from all walks of life. Really what we're looking for in an applicant is someone who's ready and willing to do whatever it takes to change their life. That's the kind of attitude that we can work with, and the kind of attitude that lends itself to rediscovering God's plan for your life. But yes, we definitely do serve a niche. And I would say the faith-based community and nonprofits in the recovery field have served a vital service for the citizens of Alabama. If you don't have insurance in the state of Alabama, your resources are extremely limited. Sure, there are government options, and there is help. Don't ever let your financial resources dictate whether or not you seek treatment or recovery. There is a path to recovery, and treatment and recovery does work. Editorially, I'm going to get on a soapbox real quick. Treatment and recovery work best together.
Yeah.
And I'll talk more about that at the end if we have time. But the niche that long-term recovery services provides is the data and the studies show that time is on a client's side. The longer they live in a safer, healthier environment, the more likely they are to be successful in gaining control of a life that may be out of control. Also, most of the services that the Foundry provides, or all the services that the Foundry provides, are in most of our similar ministries around the state. are low or no cost. These were nonprofits. We run social enterprises like our thrift stores that fund the majority of our services. We fundraise. We just had our Hearts of Hope fundraiser for our women's program yesterday. And of course, there's just generous donors who have a passion for people who are struggling, hurting, or facing addiction issues. Of course, resources are always limited, and we have to manage those appropriately. But there are scholarships available if someone wants to come to the Foundry or a similar ministry. We can connect you. If you're an opiate addict, we're going to connect you to a detox facility and help with a warm handoff. It's really about playing well with others. It's not, as you said, the Foundry is not for everyone, and that's part of our intake process. It's part of the discernment of our team to try to figure out if long-term recovery is in the client's best interest. Are they a good fit for the Foundry, and is the Foundry a good fit for them? But what we typically see, and again, there's not a typical client, but we've got really good data. The average age of our clients have risen significantly through the opioid epidemic, from an average of 35 years of age to 39. The typical client is a male. If they're an opioid user, they self-report more than 3 overdose episodes prior to arriving at the Foundry's doorstep. So let me just stop there and say we respect people who are seeking treatment and recovery, because we understand that it often takes a series of miracles for someone to show up on our doorstep. And then we also respect the fact that they are looking for additional miracles while they're with us. Because it takes a miracle to put a husband and wife back together after 15 years of drug abuse. It takes a miracle to reestablish a relationship with a daughter or a son that you haven't seen for 10 years because of your addiction. It takes a miracle not to go to prison when you have multiple felonies for choices that have been made. But I can tell you that through 20 years of recovery ministry, I have seen I've seen those miracles time after time. And if God will do that for them, he'll do it for you too. And if you don't believe that, I'll let you borrow some of my beliefs. So pick up the phone, call the Foundry. We will get you where you need to get. But we want to get you somewhere that's safe and healthy, where you can start your recovery journey.
Well, it's one of the things I've respected about you guys over the years, is because you have set yourself up in such a way that you don't rely on a fee-based to get somebody into a bed, that you can do things on a long-term basis and still have the support you need to get someone through it, which is a vital role in any state, but it's especially true in Alabama. It's one reason the Addiction Prevention Coalition has sought to be a partner, collaborate with you guys. And as you mentioned earlier about scholarships, one of the things that we are most joyful to do is to participate in helping scholarship folks to get into what, as you said, is it's certainly low cost, it's almost no cost sometimes. And so we don't ever want that one thing to stop an individual and a family from getting someone the help. So we are standing ready and proud to partner with you guys on that. So anybody's out there listening, please know that don't give up. That's available. Before we get off today, Brandon's going to give you a way to connect directly to the Foundry to talk about that type of thing. In addition, I can also testify too that the job that my adult son is working right now, 3 years after leaving the Foundry, probably closer to 4, was actually a part-time job that you guys helped him get while he was still there. And even after he messed up and disqualified himself 6 or 7 months into the program, he actually turned that little part-time job that y'all arranged into a full-time job that still supports him in sobriety right now. So that's a huge component of the idea of not just rescue, not just recovery, but helping folks actually then make it out in life in a reentry situation. So that's fabulous.
That is fabulous. Everyone's story is different. everyone's experience is different. And, if you're looking for a judgment-free zone, if you're looking for people who have walked in your shoes, our staff at the Foundry is very diverse. We have a number of folks who are in long-term recovery themselves. We have individuals who, have never been intoxicated a day in their life, but they can show you how to live life sober. I think sometimes that gets a kind of a diminished perspective, but we have such a great team of ministers at the Foundry with diverse educational backgrounds and experiences. Someone asked on a panel discussion with an agency in North Alabama, not One More Alabama, just a couple of weeks ago. You guys partnered on that call as well. And we spent a lot of time talking about the importance of relationships being a key factor in the success of what we do at ministries like the Foundry Ministries. The world is a very fast-paced, kind of cookie-cutter type of it's hard to find people in this world that care. And I think one of the greatest compliments that I ever received during the last 20 years of ministry is I had a government service provider who came and visited me. I invited him because he was kind of frustrated that he wasn't getting enough referrals from the Foundry. And we were trying to figure out if we needed to tweak our referral process or, what was going on. And he was just frustrated that we were able to get people better jobs, more sustainable jobs, higher paying jobs, full-time jobs faster than he was able to come alongside and provide resources and referrals himself. And that's one compliment that our team and the program participants work so well together to make that work. But the true compliment is after about an hour of problem solving, he just kind of stopped. And he said, can I share something with you? And I was like, sure. When someone says that, you kind of brace yourself a little bit, especially in our field. You never know what someone's going to say. And he said, I think I figured y'all out. And I'm like, okay, here it comes. He said, I figured you out. You guys just care. And it kind of took my breath away a little bit. And I can cry if I'm not careful. But I think that's a little bit of the secret sauce right there, is that we care.
Yeah.
And if we can't care for your friend or loved one the best, then we'll put the effort in to get them to the best place that fits their need. But yeah, we do feel a niche for the underserved, underinsured, and also the folks who've just burned every bridge. When you have no friends, no families, no job, no resources left, ministries like the Foundry Ministries are a legitimate option. And, we don't have to be your last stop, but often, our applicants report that they have attended on average 6 treatment or recovery, or they've tried to become sober 6 or more times before they arrive. And so, again, we pride ourselves on not giving up on people. And we hope to do that for the next 50 years.
Good. So along with this 50-year celebration, what are 1 or 2 things that you shared a few minutes ago that people might be surprised to know? 170 folks last night probably spent time in a bed in one of your facilities, right? Along with that, what are a couple of other things that people just might not know about the Foundry? We may have a stereotype in our head, and there's probably some other things we need to know.
Yeah, so something I run into frequently is when I introduce myself and tell people where I work, they often look at me a little weird. I work for the Foundry, not the furnace. Okay, that's
there is a difference.
There is a huge difference.
Yeah.
Something else, kind of a Foundry myth, is that it's expensive to get into the program, and it's just not. It's a bargain any way you slice it, dice it, or cut it. We ask for a $495 intake fee. That's just a budgeted expense so that our intake team is there. We know they're going to be there to answer phones and answer emails and provide a warm, welcoming orientation process. Because we operate our social enterprises, and that's probably the third myth, is that we are more than a retail store, we're more than a thrift store, or we're more than just a recovery program. It's a lot of moving pieces. We operate 3 thrift stores, one in Coleman, one in Fairfield, and one in Pelham. And about 60 to 70% of our operating income comes through those social enterprises. And so you may not be able to give or volunteer or advocate on behalf of the Foundry, but just about everyone can drop by a thrift store and go on a treasure hunt for something you weren't expecting or something that you need. And that goes a long way to providing the environment and the culture that we work so hard on the program side of the ministry to provide. The more resources we have, the more resources we can pass through to our clients. And so we thank our, thousands upon thousands of customers through the years and hope that the community continues to support our social enterprises. What people don't realize is that, the product that may be hanging on the rack was our program participants called and solicited that donation. Our program participants scheduled the pickup. They may have unloaded the truck and separated the clothes and qualified them, tagged them, priced them, hung them, sorted them, and put them on the floor, possibly rang them up, and then carried them out to your car. It's a huge endeavor, and our program participants play the role. I mean, the Foundry exists for them, and because they're invested in their own life recovery, they're learning how to live life sober in one of our employment readiness positions, which just, again, practicing life and practicing the principles that they're learning in class, that they're experiencing in a worship setting or a small group. It's hard to find that in a 28-day program or a once a week recovery group, which I'm not putting any of that down. Please do those things. But the benefit is it's a culture, it's an environment, and we like to use the word family at the Foundry. Once part of the Foundry family, always part of the Foundry family. So we do program ministry, and we also do program business. And when both are going well, man, there's nothing that can stop us.
Well,
that's big myth.
I can testify. My son, actually, the first job he got was in one of the thrift stores. Was his just kind of an introduction back into real life, and from there, y'all got him the other one. So, all right, so there's so much we could talk about because you wear a lot of hats. We want to get to the Alabama Association for Christian Recovery Ministries in a minute. Before we get there, I want you to speak a little bit about your involvement with the government within the state of Alabama, especially on even the governor's panel about opiates and overdose and that type of thing. And talk a little bit about what is going on currently in the climate with so-called gas station drugs.
Sure, absolutely. Prior to the call, of course, we've known each other for a long time, Art. I am a bit of a closeted introvert and prefer to kind of be in the background. I would much rather my team or the program participants or the clients that we serve get all the credit. But again, I'm going to say that God has a sense of humor, and I continually find myself in a position to advocate on behalf of marginalized individuals, hurting people. I had the privilege through my association with the Alabama Association of Christian Recovery Ministries, or ACRM for short. That's a mouthful to say that over and over again, but ACRM gave me the opportunity to represent them. Had an invitation to serve on the governor's opioid and overdose task force on the treatment and recovery committee, headed up by Nicole Walden, who's the director of treatment services for the state of Alabama. And so while firmly ensconced in a faith-based nonprofit ministry, uh, really enjoy the opportunity to advocate. We just had two of our worst months for overdose deaths in Alabama or Jefferson County history here locally where I am or where we are, and that's discouraging for those of us who have worked so hard to try to get a handle on the opioid epidemic and the continued abuse of legal and illegal opioids. And so, just kind of a privilege to be able to partner with and lend a voice for the faith-based community inside of the discussion of how do we work better together. Unfortunately, it just has not always been so. Human nature puts us in silos to begin with, and we compete, and I don't know what it is about us, but it takes an effort to collaborate and to do so well. And but considered a privilege to serve on the governor's committee. I've learned so much. I've met so many amazing people around this state. Hundreds of people now serve, and I don't think there has ever been this type of collaboration statewide in the 20 years that I've been invested in this. So it's very encouraging to meet individuals who bring their expertise to the table on behalf of the people they serve. So, yeah, really enjoy that. And
If somebody was interested in joining Akron, how would they go about contacting? Who would they contact? How would they do it?
yes, so a couple of websites. First of all, I've put the Foundry's website by my name on this video, but it's foundryministries.com. You can, before I forget, I just want to say that if you have questions, if you have a friend or a loved one, if you are struggling with addictions, then by all means, go to the website, look around. Our application is online. Give it 20 minutes. And this is our commitment. My team's commitment to you is that we will respond to your inquiry in one business day or less. And so we want to support the decisions that you're making and your family is making. To the Akron question, it's the website for Akron is aacrm.net, aacrm.net. And there's a membership page. Click a little button, 5 minutes and an upload. Your application is put in. There are very simple criteria. You have to be a Christ-centered, recovery-oriented ministry. It's a niche umbrella agency, but currently we have 33 members, and we are Alabama's largest residential recovery network with close to 4,000 recovery beds in the state. And so there's a tremendous amount of resources, very geographically diverse. You mentioned about fitting in niches and covering gaps. Akron members and Akron ministries many times have been serving for 30, 40, 50, 60, in some cases 70 years. And then there are also new ministries who are just a few months old, who are just starting out. I've met so many people with passions who want to help. Well, I would not dare start a recovery ministry of any kind, whether it's just free counseling or a recovery home or transition housing, recovery housing, without partnering with some of the men and women who have served and who've made all the mistakes before you have to save you the resources and the time and the heartache. So it's really a huge resource to join the Alabama Association of Christian Recovery Ministries for the networking opportunity, but more so for the fellowship opportunity. It can be a really lonely field to work in.
Yeah.
And it's
so for instance, if a Christ-centered ministry was out there working in prevention or recovery, but they weren't a housing ministry, they didn't have beds, they could still be a part of Akron?
They can. Just have to be Christ-centered and provide recovery services.
Okay. So something like a Celebrate Recovery, local Celebrate Recovery, or state, okay, would fit in. Okay, great. if somebody wanted to have a conversation, are you open to that? Or
Absolutely.
okay, all right,
Your application will come actually to my email address.
okay,
I don't serve on the board anymore. I serve as their executive administrator, so I help the board process the business of the association. So I can answer any questions anyone has. I think what I'm most proud about Akram is that we kind of defied people's expectations. Unfortunately, Christians have certain reputations of not getting along with each other and being divisive, and Akram has really defied that stereotype. We've come out of our silos, we've come out of our castles. We still are who we are and unapologetically Christ centered, and very strong opinions and philosophies of care preside. But for the most part, we understand that our diversity actually makes us stronger and better, and we are able to help more people when we play well with others. And so it's really been an example, I feel, to the community and the state to be able to pull that off and to continue to grow. But along with that collaboration and success has come additional influence. And as a person in the helping professions, our reputation and our influence are often, the only things that we have left at the end of the day. And we've been able to influence some legislation through the years. Most recently, Governor Ivey signed a bill, House Bill 2, sponsored by Representative Mike Holmes from Lower Alabama, to schedule 2 gas station dopes. Most people aren't aware of it. It's not on their radar. But those of us in the recovery community have really struggled with keeping our facilities and communities healthy and helping people avoid temptations, and adding keeping the accountability piece there when there have been so many chemicals slipped into the local gas station that have the exact same effects as illicit and prescription drugs. But the 2 chemicals in question that the governor signed this week were tianeptine, which acts like an opioid. It hits the same mu opioid receptors and has potential for abuse addiction, and significant withdrawal symptoms, some of the worst withdrawals of any of the chemicals that we deal with on a regular basis. And then we were able to add a chemical. It's a Russian pharmaceutical called phenibut, which very few people have heard of unless you're in a drug culture environment. And phenibut acts like a benzodiazepine. It acts like a Klonopin or a Xanax. And so for most people driving around today, I think they would be very surprised that cashiers at our gas stations have become the new pharmacists over the last 10 years. The natural supplement industry is an industry that is completely out of control. It's unregulated. The federal laws were obsolete when they were passed in 1994. And so recovery communities like the Foundry and other ministries and treatment facilities have really struggled with these clandestine chemicals that you can walk down to any store and purchase. So Akram partnered with legislators to get that passed, as well as a huge shout out to the Department of Public Health. Dr. Harris and his team helped us with tianeptine early in the process. But we also had success legislatively to pull kratom, a natural supplement from Southeast Asia that has, again, addictive abuse potential, addiction, and withdrawal symptoms because it acts like an opioid in large quantities. So 3 substances that we've been able to advocate on behalf of our clients and the treatment and recovery communities as a whole. And we've been able to do that because we did it together. We did it as members and as a fellowship in the Alabama Association of Christian Recovery Ministries, something the Foundry would not have been able to do on its own, something that the Love Community Center would not have been able to do on its own, or Jimmy Hale Mission or Brother Brian. But together we were able to influence the public health emergency.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I know one of the efforts of APC has been to form some family support groups over the years. And we just recently had a family come to one of the groups, the PAL group on Thursday, as a matter of fact, that actually had an adult son who had kicked heroin successfully and then had begun drifting into Tiana use. And it turned out to be the harder thing to kick and has had to go all the way back through rehab again and is just now coming out. So we know firsthand what you're talking about with these so-called gas station drugs. So thank y'all for what y'all done through Akron to actually get involved in the process within the government, in the system, to actually begin to influence those types of things. We're going to wind up here. We're going to have you back and we're going to do some specific things next time. We've kind of covered a lot of field today. Before we leave though, I would like you just to kind of recap for us. We see foundryministries.com right there. Ashley has gotten Akram's website information for our participants. We see that. If you could just tell us what's one or two ways that if we could help, what can people do? What are the various ways they can join in and help right now?
So from the Foundry side of the discussion, I would say, addiction affects families first. And we have a saying at the Foundry that every family deserves hope. And so if you're struggling, if your family has kind of lost its hope, we would like to serve you. So I would say first thing you do to help us would be just to reach out to us, get some information. Sometimes some good information can go a really long way, especially if you have a friend or loved one who's not interested in recovery yet. Your family can have peace in the midst of chaos. And so let me offer that hope to you. Ways to partner with the Foundry. The Foundry could not do what we do without the army of volunteers who have served through the decades. It was very hard last year, and we're really looking forward to reconnecting with some of our volunteers that we haven't seen in a while. But we would love to connect with new volunteers because, as we all know, everyone's not going to come back. Life has moved on. And so there are some men and women in our program who need mentors. We have men and women in our program who need your connections and your advocacy on their behalf. So volunteering is key. Of course, resources being what they are. Our donors have been so generous. But I would be remiss if I didn't remind folks that we serve folks who come to us with empty pockets and empty hands. And so let us be a pass-through. Let us help you bless some individuals who aren't interested in the handout, but they're interested in, again, being invested in their own life recovery and doing so in a healthy, safer, and professional environment. The program consists of 5 main components: counseling, case management services, education /class/spiritual enrichment, employment readiness, and then aftercare. For a program participant to receive the benefits of all 5 of those key areas of life, we need financial support, and you can give through our website, foundryministries.com. And then I would say, really, lastly, and it's just not a platitude. It really, prayer changes things. Generally, it changes the person who's praying the most, but we believe that God moves on people's lives. And I will say that over the last 2 months, we have experienced just a very life-giving period of time. A year ago, there was so much fear and anxiety and uncertainty, but today at the Foundry, there's so much hope and joy. We've actually baptized more than 50 individuals in the last 2 months in our various ministries. And that's not that's not something that we force on people. That's a personal decision made between them and their Creator. and they are excited to share that experience with their friends and fellow program participants and the staff that have made a difference in their life. So that's the kind of life change that gets me fired up. And that kind of life change does not happen accidentally. It's very intentional, and it takes men and women of God to support us in prayer and to cover us in prayer for that to continue.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Guys, you see it, foundryministries.com, and we've corrected ourselves, aacrm.net. Is that right? For the Alabama Association of Christian Recovery Ministries. Brandon, thank you for what you're doing. Thank your whole staff, your volunteers. And we hope we're going to have you back again. And we look forward to collaborating through APC with you guys. Thanks so much.
It has been my pleasure. God bless.
Bless you. Thanks, folks. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back again soon with another webinar. Don't forget to connect to Brandon either through Foundries or through AACRM. Thank you. Goodbye. We'll see you next time.